Well, good morning and welcome. My name is Teresa Campbell, and you have joined today's PIM and PIA Mid-America Financial Executives Council presentation on IT security insights. Note that all of our attendees are placed in mute mode so that we can ensure a quality recording that will be provided to our members in the coming days. But we encourage you to comment and to submit questions during the program. You can type them in the Q&A field or the chat field at the bottom of your screen, and they'll be asked at the most appropriate time. Know that the Financial Executives Council is coordinated by leaders in both North Central and South Central regions of the U.S. They guide the programs and content offered 6 times a year, and the focus is on financial reporting and compliance, data management, and security and financial policies and planning. Our council co-chairs are Carl Nathy with Myers Printing, Ryan Wagner with Action Mailing and Printing, Matt Wills with LB Carlson, and Ken Rain with Daily Printing. Ken, will you introduce our panelists?
I'd love to, Teresa. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce our 2 presenters today. The first is going to be Andrew Renn. And Andrew is an account executive in the Association Risk Management Services Department of Federated Insurance. Andrew is responsible for managing Federated Association partners and buying groups in the upper Midwest in Illinois, Iowa, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and Wisconsin. Andrew began his Federated career in 2021, and he works with business owners in the areas of safety, risk, and business management. He has doubled the number of business owners he's worked with over the past 3 years. And I'd also like to introduce our second presenter, Randy Anderson. He is the cybersecurity and IT consulting manager at Loffler in St. Louis Park, Minnesota. He has 25 years of IT experience and is passionate about safeguarding information. Randy has been at the forefront of the cybersecurity field, and he has developed the ThreatGuard Managed Cybersecurity Program, which focuses on information security governance, security monitoring, vulnerability management, security education, awareness, and incident response and preparedness. Both of our presenters are very well qualified to talk about this subject, and I'd like to turn it over to Andrew. So thank you, gentlemen.
All right, Ken, thank you. I'm just going to share my screen here. All right, so thank you guys. I'm going to talk a little bit today about just managing your cyber risk and how coverage isn't always enough. There's things that we can do in the meantime to safeguard and protect the information that we're storing. And so most cyber attacks are going to be on small to medium businesses with less than 50 million in revenue, but such a small percentage have an actual plan in place on how they're going to secure that data and information. And so let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a cyber event. What is it, right? So first we have to figure out whose data are we keeping? Is it going to be employee records, client information, the business's own data, and then the types of the personal data. So social security numbers, date of birth, mother's maiden name, all that personal type of stuff. We just have to understand whose data and then the type of data that we're keeping, and then where that data is going to be. So is it going to be more on paper records, electronic records, and really who has access to it? Is it anybody and everybody? Is it third parties, just a select number of people? Kind of have to understand what we're working with so then we can develop a proper plan to protect it all. And so cyber events happen really, really quickly. It can be as simple as opening up a phishing email and clicking one of those links that are compromised, and then what happens from there. 95% of cyber events are due to human error, and so we're going to just try to open it up a little bit.
Today we sent a camera out on Hollywood Boulevard to help people by asking them to tell us their password. And this is how that went.
We're talking about cybersecurity today and how safe people's passwords are. What is one of your online passwords currently?
It is my dog's name and the year I graduated from high school.
Oh, what kind of dog do you have?
I have a Chihuahua Papillon,
And what's its name?
Jameson.
Jameson. And where'd you go to school?
I went to school back in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
What school?
Hempfield Area Senior High School
Oh, when did you graduate?
in 2009.
Oh, great.
It's like my cat's name and then just like a random number.
Okay. Has you had this cat for a while?
Yeah, she's my childhood pet.
Aw. And what's her name?
Her name is Jolie.
Jolie. So, like a password would be Jolie and then a number.
Yeah.
Like number 1.
Like my birthday,
Oh, when is your birthday?
June 12th,
Oh, nice. And what year were you born?
95.
Oh, great.
Mhm.
So Jolie, 6/12/95.
Yes.
Got it.
So you mean to give my password right now? No, I cannot do that.
But we all want to know what it is so we can tell you if it's strong or not.
Oh my goodness. Let me think. Okay, one is Tel Aviv. Yeah. 468, and then Israel. It's only 3, but it's for me it's strong enough.
Ireland, 1, 2, 3, 4. Gemma, 1, 2, 3. Spelled Gemma.
Well, most of them are Italian.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. So
what- like what's a good Italian password?
my grandma's name,
What's your grandma's name?
Maria.
Maria. So Maria is your password?
Oh yeah, now you know my password. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, the important thing is they learned a terrible lesson.
All right, so that was just a little bit of a funny video on really how unsecure some things can be, and really just how important it is to kind of keep those passwords and everything close to the chest there. Because once it goes out and things are compromised, that's when the stress really happens and when the work really begins. So that's either going to come in forms of notification costs, lawsuits, proprietary info being breached, a ransom being demanded, and most importantly, loss of business reputation there. So some best practices around cybersecurity. First, we got to know about it. We need to understand the scale that we're working with. Are we holding too much information, not enough information? Gonna have to create a plan on what to do with it, lock it up and protect it, and then obviously train our employees on best practices to do with emails, with just all of the communication and everything done online today. I think a lot of times we just get used to it, click on random links, and then that's when the hackers are in. And so who, what, where, and why. So let's take a look at the types of information that's being collected, where we're keeping the information, who could have access to it. If you really don't need the information or you have too much of it, scale back a little bit. No need to hold on to information that you don't need. That's just going to create more liability. And then what are we going to plan to do with it? So, if there was a cyber event, think to yourselves, do we have a plan in place? Do we even know who we would call, what we would do? Try to get those things in line, kind of like a fire drill plan is what I like to say. Daily and weekly backups, and make sure all the data is encrypted. And then the multi-factor authentication. So this is something that my company uses where I log onto my computer, but then I have to get a pop-up on my phone and verify that it's me. That's another thing. It's annoying, but it's something that is very simple and easy to do, which has a huge impact on protecting the information.
So Andrew, there's a question here, and I know that you may be getting to it, but I'm going to throw it out there just so that you can think about how you would answer it. What's the largest breach that one of your customers has experienced, and what was the result to the business?
Okay, well, I can, a cyber breach, really, I haven't experienced that personally. What I experienced was like a computer funds transfer fraud. So somebody clicked on one of those links and thought it was from the CFO. It wasn't from the CFO. they sent over $250,000 through this link. And, you know, once it was sent, it's gone. And then you're really trying to figure out, one, is my cyber insurance policy, does it cover computer funds transfer? A lot of times it's looked at as if you're giving somebody cash, and once the cash is gone, the cash is gone. So that didn't happen in my territory specifically, but it did happen in the state of Virginia. And, you know, that business, it didn't put them out of business, but it definitely, you know, interrupted some things for a few minutes, interrupted cash flow severely.
Did their insurance cover the loss?
So we had a computer funds transfer on the policy, but not at that limit. So we covered up to our limit, and then the next year they beefed up that limit a good bit.
Good to know.
And so really the question to ask is, how much money would we be sending through the computer at one time? Who has access to that? Is that going to be the business owner and just the controller, maybe the CFO? Really trying to dial down on, when you click that link, who has the authority to actually submit payment? And we'll get to it. Just not something that you should do online. A 30-second phone call that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, is this legitimate? You want us to send it to this bank account now? You want us to wire it to somewhere different? All those types of things should be red flags.
Okay.
A good thing to have on emails as well is just like an external banner. So you know, hey, is it really from my CFO or is it from somebody external? If they would have had something just like this, then the employee would have been able to know, hey, this doesn't seem right. They shouldn't be asking me for it. And so like we said, never accept the text, email, fax requesting payment changes to account routing numbers from clients, vendors, management, or employees. Just pick up the phone and call.
So Andrew, another question about the example that you gave. You mentioned that they did increase their coverage for the amount that would be potentially lost in a transfer, but did they improve their cybersecurity policies?
Right. So then they started to go into this money and banking. So like the double signature on approval, or I'm forgetting the term right now, but I know a lot of banks do it where the businesses write checks and then the next morning you have to go in and approve all those checks. So that's kind of what they started to do. They really started to trim down on who could send money. And then for an account like that, it was, hey, a dollar amount over this much, only one person can send. And then they worked it in bands like that. And then that's really how they got control over really what their processes were.
Mm-hmm.
It was really a process change for them.
Great.
And then using like a password manager program, I hate having to change my password a bunch of times, but it's so important to do. We'll get into it a little bit, but having at least 8 characters in the password and a mixture of what that password is made up of is so important. It can be frustrating, but for example, if you just have an 8 character password and all it is numbers, it's going to take a hacker 37 seconds to hack you. Now, if you go and you have the same amount of characters, 8 characters, but it's a mixture between numbers, uppercase and lowercase letters, and then also symbols, it goes all the way to 7 years. So from 37 seconds to 7 years, huge difference. So I hate having to keep track of all my passwords and every time that I have to change them and things like that, but it's all for good reason. Even if you go down to a 13 character password and still have the same numbers, uppercase, lowercase, and symbols, you go from 7 years to 11 billion years. So 5 more characters, and now you're up into the billions. And so that's really how you can protect your stuff. So I know that there's a few things that you can look up online on some strategies. I have a strategy for myself, but who would I be to share that during this presentation, right?
Right. This is terrific information. Great slide.
And so yeah, just never share the password. Kind of that video that we watched, I would never do that. I hope that everybody here would never do that. It's just not, don't be giving that type of stuff out. And like we said, kind of encrypt your information there. And then make sure, like back to the training process for your employees, make sure that the websites are HTTPS. You know, that's a secure website. educate, stay informed, and repeat the training for your employees. So whether that's automatic phishing emails, or whether it's just being diligent and pulling your office staff in once a quarter, twice a year, and just kind of going over this stuff, making sure that employees are using computer or business-owned computers and everything for business purposes, and not really doing online shopping or going on Facebook or anything like that. You want to keep personal and business completely separated. And then, so the underwriting requirements, right? So we talked a little bit about an insurance policy, and this presentation was just to be, the policy is there for if everything that we do to prevent it falls short. But really what we should be focusing on is how we can prevent the claim from even happening, or the event from happening in the first place. But then if you need the insurance to come into place, it's something that's going to have to be, that you have to qualify for. So some of that is going to be the cyber event response plan. We want to know, just like if your building is on fire, how are people going to get out of the building safe? You know, what are you going to do when this happens? What are we doing in the meantime? So is there multi-factor authentications? Are we updating and backing up our information on a consistent basis? And are we training our employees to make sure that we're staying on top of all this? All those types of things are what insurance companies are looking for, to give you those heightened limits of that $250,000 example that I gave, and even higher. You know, that you're going to have to be doing stuff in the meantime to prevent the event to qualify for a limit that high. And so some additional resources that we have will be the Federated's Risk Management Resource Center. If you're a Federated client, then the MyShield portal. And then if you're a Federated client or not, we have local marketing representatives throughout all the states. This link right here, will be able to click into that, type in your business address, and then your local representative will be able to help you with all of this. And so hope that I taught you guys a few things, didn't bore you too much, and just appreciate everybody being here.
Andrew, talk a little bit about remote workers. I know that you had that on a slide just 2 or so back, and that impacts all of us today. It is really something that all workers at some point seem to have a laptop, or work from home, or work from their phone, or work from anywhere, hotel, airport, you name it. And it's opened up so much exposure to unsecure networks. What are your recommendations there, and how do you handle it with an insurance aspect if they're a remote worker?
So remote workers are tricky. I mean, when anything gets far enough away, you start to lose a little bit of control there. So that's where the training really comes into place. And whether that is a computer-based training program that they're signed up for. Like, for example, I'm a remote employee. And so what Federated does for me is I have the multi-factor authentication when I log in. They have to make sure that it's me. They have the email banner. So I understand that if it's not coming from within my organization, I already have to be on the lookout for a few things. Federated also sends us simulated phishing emails. So then I have a button that I click that if I report it correctly, no action is taken. If I click the link and it's wrong, I'm immediately assigned to a training. And then annually, Federated sends me several, much like your harassment, discrimination, the driving policies, things like that. The whole cyber policy is in it as well. And then to take it a layer deeper to kind of protect the organization there, we have a cyber policy that all of us have to follow. So my computer, if a business's website is their Facebook page, I can't access it. Facebook is not secure enough for us. So they're very diligent on, these are the websites that you're able to access. These are the websites that you're not able to access. And it's kind of really making sure that your employees understand. And I always say it like this: if it's important enough, somebody's going to send you a second email, or they're going to reach out and call you. And, you know, it's better to say, you know, I wasn't sure whether that was legitimate or not, and I didn't want to compromise anything. I apologize. Obviously, I know now that it's not illegitimate. So then now, yeah, here we go. Let's talk. That's really what I would say is you're really going to have to fine tune your in-house policies and your in-house processes to try to maintain as much control as possible.
So Andrew, that's a lot to unpack. There's a couple of questions in the chat. Does Federated aid clients in developing a cybersecurity policy designed for their individual businesses?
We can help you with the cybersecurity policy, yes.
Excellent. Here on this slide, you say a written cyber event response plan. Do you help with those as well?
Right, yeah, that's all within that whole cyber policy is gonna have different segments in it. One of them is going to be the response plan. One of them is going to be the training plan. One of them is going to be the rules and expectations of business-owned computer equipment.
Okay.
Cell phones, tablets, it all applies.
So while nobody ever wants to have a security breach, if it occurs, does Federated help them work through an incident like that?
Right, yep, we
running?
do. So typically how that works is there's going to be a, within our risk management resource center, we have another vendor that we work with who can, who helps with all the response plan. If there's ransom that's being asked and stuff like that, there's sub limits within our insurance policy for that. So really I would encourage everybody to get with your insurance agent and don't high step the cyber. We've seen a huge increase in this since COVID, and the first slide mentioned it. Most of the attacks are on businesses making less than 50 million top line revenue, and they're just able to kind of pick on those smaller fish there. It's not necessarily the Walmarts of the world that are being hacked, although you do hear these big. I think the FAA at one point in time was hacked, and like I'm getting on an airplane today. I don't want to think like that, but it's legitimate. It's real.
Right. Most of our industry is going to fall in that under 50 million. The printing industry, packaging, for the most part, is many small businesses. So Andrew,
Right,
you're gonna provide a PDF of these slides that will include, correct? So we can give it to the members who are who are attending, so they can utilize your resources.
Sure.
Excellent. And then if anybody has questions they're not sure of, can they reach out to you directly? And if not, they can reach out to us and the PIA chapters can direct them to you.
Yeah, or you can always feel free to reach out to me. If you reach out to me, I'm most likely gonna look up who your local representative is, and I'll include them on all of our communication because they're gonna be the ones that can pop out and see you in your office, can see you on site, and they're gonna be the ones that can help you with your business insurance policy as well. But yeah, it'll kind of be a tag team effort there.
Okay, terrific, great information. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
All right, I think we are going to move on to the next presenter and topics. Andrew, if you'll stay on the line, there may be questions that come up that relate back to your presentation,
Sure.
and we'll ask questions of you as well.
Absolutely.
All right, Randy, you're up.
All right, thank you. Give me just a couple seconds here to get my slideshow up. All right. Okay, so I just have a pretty simple agenda today. We work a lot with cyber insurance carriers. In our work as an MSP or a managed services provider, we've actually taken a lot of direction from cyber insurance underwriters over the last 5 years. And I think that was because historically there were a lot of claims that were paid out in the time frame from about 4 years ago, stretching back to about 8-10 years ago. And so the underwriting requirements have definitely tightened up. So you'll see a lot of the same kind of themes here. We're also gathering information from other third parties. As we work with our customers, we're finding increasingly that they are being assessed by other entities within their supply chain, just looking to minimize the disruption, making sure that all of the information is being secured and that business continuity is addressed and so forth. So again, we'll see a lot of the same kinds of themes here, but let's start with a scary statistic. And this is one that I've seen represented a few different ways over the last few years or so. And the percent number ranges from about 54% up to even about 70-75%. But for our purposes today, let's agree that about 60% of small and medium businesses will go out of business within 6 months of a major cyber attack. And there's a lot of kind of direct costs related to this, the cost of investigation and eradication and containment and recovery. There may be ransom payments, and there may be costs here that are covered by cyber insurance. There may be organizations that don't have a cyber insurance company, and so they're going to end up paying for some of these. But it's disruptive regardless, and there's going to be some downtime, anywhere from a couple of days to even a couple of weeks of downtime. I think that there was a question in the chat earlier about the size and scope of these types of incidents. And I think the largest ransom demand that I've ever seen is on the order of $10 million. And now if we were to roll back the clock maybe 4 or 5 years, I think they were more in the realm of maybe 50,000 to 150,000. So there's been kind of an escalation in terms of the ransom demands over the years. But don't forget, there's a lot of other kind of intangible aspects here that you may not be aware of, which would include reputational harm and loss of employee trust. I was speaking with an organization just a couple weeks ago about some strategic setbacks that they faced in the aftermath of not one but 2 cyber attacks. So the first cyber attack was kind of that archetypical encrypting malware type of an attack. The second attack was more in the email side of things, the business email compromise. And they said that delayed them about 6 to 12 months in terms of their strategic vision.
Wow. You talk about fines on that previous slide, Randy. What type of fines would businesses be looking at? And then there's another question here, and that is, what's your opinion on paying ransom payments?
Those are great questions. Fines. So regulated industries, if any organization that is, comes under the auspices of HIPAA, healthcare organizations, any organization that comes under FTC safeguard rule regulations, they may be subject to regulatory fines if there is an event that causes personal healthcare information or personal information to be leaked out into the internet. And so that would be the kinds of fines that we're talking about there, typically more in regulated industries, although we're seeing this more and more as more states adopt privacy regulations that are more akin to the GDPR regulations in the European Union. We're going to see some additional state level fines and exposures there. My opinion on paying ransom is that that's a business decision first and foremost. It is something that I think there are some deep held philosophical beliefs about this. Most organizations that I speak with, they say we are absolutely opposed to paying any sort of a ransom. And when push comes to shove, they might not have any other choice. What's important to note here, though, too, is that paying that ransom might be completely illegal. The OFAC, or the Office of Foreign Asset Control, maintains a list of different threat actor groups that are, thought to have a nexus in terrorism, and they would therefore be illegal recipients of a ransom payment. So it's important that as you're going through an incident response with a professional incident response team, that you're evaluating the legality of any ransom payment before, first and foremost.
Interesting. Thank you.
We're going to break things up now. This is a little bit of audience participation. We're going to do a quick assessment. One of the things that we do is we help our customers operationalize some of the things that Andrew talked about and some of the other great ideas that come from different parts of the industry. And we start that engagement with an assessment. Now, our assessments are bigger than 13 questions that we're going to be talking about here. We have different levels of assessment, 170 types of questions, 400 questions, and 700 questions, depending on what industry our customer is in and what level of maturity they enter the conversation with. But we're going to keep it simple for today. And I'm asking you just to pull out a piece of paper, a Post-it note, or open up Notepad on your laptop and just keep score. And I'm going to award points for certain things. And so give yourself 1 point if each of the following are true, or for each one of these that's true. Does your organization have a culture of security? Do you have, from the top down, from the leadership level on down, this culture of security that says security is important to us, we take it seriously, we actively seek to measure and understand risk and manage risk? And do we push that information down to the departments and the individual employees? So give yourself 1 point if that's true. Do you have up-to-date security policies? And so security policies, sometimes when we start to assess this and unpack it, we find that organizations have what they consider to be security policies, and it turns out that they have paragraphs, not policies. They have paragraphs in an employee handbook that speak to acceptable use and internet use and email use and those kinds of things. Now, those are all very good. We often find, though, that they're not up to date. They haven't been kept up to date, and they may not be completely effective. And so we want to make sure that organizations have a full set of security policies. Most organizations are going to need 15 to 25 individual information security policies as they go about their business. And those policies, I won't name them all, but just some examples: a password policy that operationalizes some of the ideas that Andrew gave, that solidifies that and formalizes that. Access control policies, determining who has access to certain information, data retention policies, bring your own device policies, clean desk policies, and we could go on and on and on. So if you have those policies, if you have that complete set, maybe 15 to 25 of those policies, give yourself 1 point. Do you have an up-to-date incident response plan? So that incident response plan would direct the organization as to what consists of a security event or an incident or a breach, and how do you respond to that? How do you communicate with employees and customers? When do you engage legal teams, breach counsel? When do you engage cyber insurance? When do you contact the FBI? All those sorts of questions should be answered in your incident response plan, along with very important contact information, so that you can get a hold of very important people in your organization and outside of your organization to help you get through that security event. Do you have an up-to-date disaster recovery plan? This is more of the nuts and bolts tactical aspect of how do you recover that data, whether that data is under your control on your premise or whether that data is out there in the cloud. What does that cloud provider do to protect that data? How do you access recovery methods and techniques for that cloud provider? Do you have adequate and appropriate cyber insurance? I'm not a cyber insurance broker, but I know that you should have coverage that meets your needs. And so I would urge you to talk to the right person to get that adequate and appropriate coverage, not too much and not too little, and make sure that it addresses all of your concerns, including the recovery, including the incident response, and including any sort of PR or legal requirements that you might have too. And do you have documented IT standards and procedures? A lot of the organizations we work with, they'll come to us and they'll say, well, we're doing these things, and they may be doing all the right things in practice, but they haven't taken the step of writing it down and formalizing it and making sure that someone else can follow that checklist. And so this is a very simple process of writing down all of the things that the organization does to protect information security. All right, we're going to go next to another part of this assessment, which is 2 points. Each one of these questions is worth 2 points. And we'll start with the first one, EDR. And I think Andrew spoke about that one a little bit. EDR stands for Endpoint Detection and Response. EDR is like the grown-up version, the next generation of antivirus. And so if your antivirus has a name like Symantec or Norton or Trend Micro or something like that, you might want to look at this and look at modernizing it. By name, some of the EDR providers that exist out there are SentinelOne and Carbon Black and Microsoft Endpoint Detection. And there's another one too, Cylance, which was just purchased by a company called Arctic Wolf Networks, and they've rebranded it as Aurora. So endpoint detection and response goes above and beyond. It's looking at the actual code that's being run on those machines, looking for behavior patterns that are abnormal, and then alerting on that. The DR in EDR is detection and response, and it implies that you've got kind of this centralized repository for all of these events and alerts, and that someone is looking at it and someone is able to respond to it. If you're a larger organization, you'll have teams internally that are doing this. If you're a smaller organization, likely you'll look at outsourcing this to a managed services provider or a similar organization. Effective security monitoring. Do you have security monitoring? So let's talk about what this means. In a larger organization, we would be looking for something called a SIM, or a Security Information and Event Management tool. And that SIM would be that repository for all of the events that are happening, not just on the endpoints, but on the servers, on the firewalls, switches, wireless access points, and also in the cloud-based services. Most of these types of tools now will tie into cloud-based services and bring in all those events together so that expert systems and, dare I say, AI algorithms can work on that data and churn through the hundreds of thousands of events that happen every day or even every hour and look for those things that are suspicious and then send those alerts to the right people. Implied in this is that you've got some sort of a security operations center, a SOC, that has analysts that are looking at that data, validating that it's real and determining what the next steps are in terms of how to solve that problem. Multi-factor authentication, I say for all critical systems. The email systems are important. Anything that has financial data, anything that has patient data, anything that has PII or personally identifiable information, anything that has anything that you need to protect your relationship with your employees and your clients and so forth, needs to have multi-factor authentication. And here's something that we're getting from the cyber insurance industry, is that this multi-factor authentication has to be done also internally for systems that are internal to your network, maybe traditional server-based systems. It has to be done for the administrator accounts for that as well. Effective end user training. Effective, I think that could take a number of different turns here, but doing this more than once a year, doing this more than on an ad hoc basis. I would suggest maybe quarterly or monthly would be the minimum that I'd be looking for here. There are lots of subscription tools that you can access that will drive employees to different training that's delivered in a bite-sized manner, not overwhelming them, that maybe takes them 5 minutes to consume, and then you're testing it with those phishing simulations on a regular basis. And test your incident response plan annually. The best way, or the most common way that this is done, is through an incident response tabletop exercise. And really what that means is that you've got a contrived scenario that is introduced to a team of people, and then they're asked to solve it. It becomes kind of a choose your own adventure play for them. They're using the contents of their incident response plan, they're using the resources that they have at hand, they're using their knowledge of the environment, and they're using their decision-making capabilities and exercising them under fire, and then recording the results and improving all of those aspects. Next one here is vulnerability management. Having a way to test for those open ports on your firewall, having a way to test for missing patches and misconfigured systems and expired security certificates and devices on your network that you might not even know about. I think one of the common examples of devices on the network that you might not know about would be things like TVs and refrigerators that are increasingly being connected to the network. And if they're not maintained in some way, some effective way, they represent vulnerabilities that may give an attacker, if they get into your environment or when they get into your environment, they may give them a foothold. Then the last one here is doing an annual security risk assessment, something a little bit larger than this risk assessment. Doing it a little bit more broadly and more deeply, getting into those 200 questions or 400 questions, and truly assessing how well is the organization doing holistically with information security. All right, so we're going to change over now to looking at the results, and I'll give everyone just a few seconds to think about those results. Tally up the results. Remember to give yourself 1 point for each one of the ones in the left-hand column. Give yourself 2 points for each one of the ones in the right-hand column. Okay, so let's take a look at how these might score out. If you scored 16 to 20, I would say great job. You're doing most of the things you need to do. Don't get complacent. And I think the best example here would be AI. 3-4 years ago, AI acceptable use policies weren't even on our radars. And so now it's become more common that we're helping companies implement AI policies. So the world is always changing. Make sure that you're paying attention, you're adapting, you're doing those annual risk assessments. You've still got a little bit of work to do. And the work of building an information security program is never ending. You have to stay on top of it. If you scored 11 to 15, I'd say you're doing pretty good. You're poised to go from good to great. I think you're already doing a lot of the core things that we need you to do. Consider getting some outside assistance and guidance if you don't have the talent internally. And that's going to help you just understand objectively where you need to go and the things that you need to spend time and potentially money addressing over the course of the next year or two. If you scored 10 or less, I think you've got some serious work to do. You're going to need to put some focus on this. You're going to need to create that culture of security from the top down. You're definitely going to need some outside assistance to get a handle on where to go and how to get there. And just remember, as you're going through this process, it is definitely not possible to do everything at once. But if you start now and you embrace the concept of continuous improvement, you will get there over time. It's going to take you 2 to 3 years before I think you'd have what I would consider to be a mature information security program, but you'll get there. As you're going through that process, beware of products and solutions that promise a quick fix. I think the best example I can give here is that recently, within the last couple of years, certain businesses, they came under the purview of the FTC, under the FTC safeguards rule. And so certain new businesses that previously hadn't been under that rule were approached by a lot of just kind of upstart companies, and they promised this quick fix and checked all the boxes. And as we're going back and kind of looking at what they're doing, we're finding that they're really not complete solutions, and they're not doing what they say that they're going to do. So beware of the snake oil that's being sold out there sometimes.
Wow, that is a lot, Randy. I'm sure that
Yeah.
we have some members on the call that say, ah, we're a small company. We only have 10 employees or 25 employees or 50 employees, and we don't have the budget for all of these computer programs. That's quite costly. Does your company scale these requirements based on the size of the group?
Absolutely. We do. We have programs that scale starting in the, let's just say, 20 employee range on up. And so there's a certain amount of effort that we have with any of our programs to deliver services to any company, regardless of the size. And then from there, the math kicks in, and it's based on kind of a per device model. A lot of MSPs and MSSPs, or managed security services providers, will have that type of a pricing scale. There's also just the concept of doing what's appropriate for your organization. Not every organization is handling, healthcare information or nuclear secrets or anything like that. And so approaching the policy question, kind of appropriately for your organization is important. When we talk about security policies, we'll talk a lot about making them free of jargon, making them easy to understand and follow for any employee. Larger organizations are probably going to stray a little bit from that. They still need to be effective, but there's definitely ways of scaling these types of approaches to small and medium businesses.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'm going to turn the page just a little bit more here, and I'm going to talk about different domains of cybersecurity or information security. And this information comes to me from an organization called ISC Squared. And ISC Squared is an organization that they administer an industry-leading cybersecurity certification. And so that's called the CISSP certification. And there are about 150 certified individuals worldwide, about 150,000 worldwide, and about 100,000 in the United States alone. But they tell us that these are the different cybersecurity domains. And the reason I point this out is because, especially with small and medium businesses, you may not, kind of have a full awareness of this, but at a certain level, you need to address these different areas. And so security risk management, this would be having a program, having executive sponsorship, having that culture of cybersecurity, doing the things that you need to do on a regular annual basis. Asset security, making sure that you have a good asset inventory of not only hardware and software, but also cloud-based services, and that you have an effective method for evaluating those cloud-based services as you are contracting with those providers and as you evaluate them on a regular basis. Making sure that you know where your data lives too and who has access to it. Communication and network security, just what it sounds like, making sure that those firewalls are in place, they're configured appropriately, that encryption is turned on, and so forth. Security architecture and engineering, making sure that there's thoughtful design to the services and the hardware and the software that is employed within the organization. Identity and access management. A lot of organizations now are using Microsoft 365. And so Microsoft 365 Entra ID, Microsoft Entra ID can become the primary identity provider. And this makes things, with a little bit of work, this makes things a lot easier in terms of implementing things like single sign-on and multi-factor authentication. And so solving some of those problems that Andrew spoke about becomes a little bit easier as you adopt those types of services. Security assessment and testing. This is that vulnerability management, the vulnerability scanning that occurs on a regular basis. I'd say vulnerability scanning should be done at least monthly. Security operations. This is all about the people and the tools that you're using to monitor events that are happening within the organization and within those cloud-based services. And then the final domain is software development security. I know that not all organizations have their own internal software development teams, but you might on occasion work with a third-party provider that's developing maybe an integration between one cloud services provider and another. And so I would just urge you as you're going through that process that you're looking a little bit more deeply into their security practices. What are they doing to ensure that the code that they're writing is safe from vulnerabilities? How are they testing it before it goes into production and after, and patching it afterwards too? One other concept that I want to put out here is just the idea that an organization should have an information security program. And I'm not going to talk about hardware or software at all in this piece. I'm not going to talk about anything with blinky lights or knobs and dials or anything, but an information security program, it's that comprehensive set of policies, procedures, standards, and behaviors that guide the organization's action in protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. And so this concept, this CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, it's really the lens with which we view information security. A lot of times we get kind of hung up on confidentiality, but increasingly as we move into the cloud, we have to be thinking about availability. How do we make sure that our people can get reliable access to that information? Cybersecurity frameworks, these are the common sets of standards. These are the rules to the game, really. Written down rules. It requires that you've got written policies and procedures. NIST 800 is one of the common ones. SOC 2 common criteria. PCI, HIPAA. CIS is another one that's common in the United States. Center for Internet Security, that's an organization that's been around for a long time. Their cybersecurity standards and their assessment tools are a little bit more proprietary, so there's some aspect of cost in terms of complying with them. NIST is a little bit more open. It's our own United States government, National Institute of Standards and Technologies, that has brought about those cybersecurity policies. Another concept kind of related here is that compliant does not equal secure. And what I mean by this is that we have an organization that wants to be secure. They may be in healthcare, so they've got HIPAA requirements that direct them on how to secure patient data. They might also be transacting credit card payments, so they're under PCI requirements. These cybersecurity frameworks like NIST and CIS and ISO and SOC 2, they all kind of come into play to fill in the gaps that might exist. Because to have a full mature security program, you've got to go above and beyond what the absolute requirements are. And if you put all these things together, along with the things that have the blinky lights and the knobs and dials and the software and the hardware and everything that you do, you can be a more secure organization. And I put it in scare quotes because no organization is going to be 100% secure. There's always going to be some risk of a security event or incident or breach, and you need to be prepared for that too. A lot of these common requirements, again, come to us from cyber insurance. They come to us from these cybersecurity frameworks. They come to us from third-party assessments. But we've already talked a lot about these. Let's just go through them really quickly. Multi-factor authentication, the EDR, the vulnerability scans, vulnerability management, good backups, and having tested those recoveries. manage manage end of support for software and hardware. Those systems that are in some organizations that are out of date, that are no longer supported by the manufacturer, represent risk because security updates and upgrades are not being produced for them. And so when an attacker gets a hold of those systems, by and large, those are the ones that they're going to attack first. Security logging and monitoring, that's that MDR type of solution, training and phishing, vulnerability management, password manager, least access, identity management, single sign-on, they all kind of go hand in hand. Having that incident response plan and annually testing that. So I'll conclude here today with just kind of 13 tips from our discussion. And the first column is just more in the realm of governance, risk, and compliance. This is the academic, theoretical aspect of cybersecurity. Do that annual risk assessment, have the effective security policies in place, have formal IT standards and procedures, do that training and awareness regularly, at least quarterly, preferably monthly. Have an IR plan and test it annually. Have a DR plan and test it annually, or better yet, every 6 months to make sure that you can recover not only a full system, not only an individual file, not only an individual calendar entry or a user or a group in Active Directory, but also that you can recover data from that cloud-based service, or you can recover a full system. Have an effective asset management system that takes into account not just hardware and software, but also where your data lies and those cloud-based services that you're using that have your data. On the more technical side, MFA, the EDR, endpoint detection and response, vulnerability management, MDR, the security monitoring, air-gapped and encrypted backups, including cloud-based systems, and effective identity management and access control, whether that's a simple password manager or whether it's more complete with single sign-on and some of the conditional access rules that come with those types of solutions. And then final slide, I won't go through each one of these, but these are some of the services that we offer. We've packaged them up into a couple of distinct offerings. The first is called ThreatGuard, which is a little bit more practical, tactical, a little bit more technical. And then the second offering that we have is more the vCISO, or Virtual Chief Information Security Officer, more about consulting. And we help our customers with the security policies and penetration testing and incident response tabletop exercises through those different vehicles. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, here's my email address. You can look me up on LinkedIn, and I'll turn it back to Teresa now at this point.
Terrific. That's a lot of information, Randy. We are going to ask Andrew to turn his camera back on and come back for a Q&A session, because I think there's a lot to cover. While he does that, talk a little bit about liability and exposing others. And there's, different scenarios of that. But if our members are partnering with other companies, and they're allowing them to access information, where does the liability end? If you're not PCI compliant on the credit card processing side, and there is a hack, are you liable for that?
Most assuredly, yeah. So what we're seeing happen a lot more, and I spoke about this a little bit, is that organizations are assessing their supply chain a little bit more stringently than they've ever done before. And so they will be assessing their vendors, their providers, with these kind of 100 question, 200 question surveys for their information security practices. They're going to be asking if they have these policies in place. They're going to be asking if they have these practical controls in place. And so it's incumbent on those supply chain managers, those risk managers, to understand the security posture of the companies they're doing business with.
That's a really, really great point. We get involved a little bit in credit card processing, and our provider requires PCI compliance, and some will say it's such a hassle and I don't know the questions to the survey, and this guy over here is gonna do my credit card processing, and he doesn't require that. He doesn't require me to be PCI compliant. I don't have to fill out that survey. So this is so much easier path of least resistance. I'm gonna go that direction. What are your thoughts there?
PCI, I think it's important to understand that there are different levels of PCI compliance, and that's based entirely on the number of payment card transactions that you process in a given year. There's also just the concept of transferring that risk. And so if you work with a payment processor, you can effectively transfer the majority of that risk to them as long as you don't hold that credit card data in your systems. And so that would then give you the option to have a lower level of PCI compliance and be subject to less stringent controls. You're putting the higher requirements on that payment card processor. So I definitely would be looking into that as an option.
There's a question here from the group on, really, this is for both of you. Does your ability to get cyber insurance coverage require some amount of policy procedures in place?
So, Randy, you've talked a lot, so I'll give you a little bit of a break. Yeah, so the last couple slides on my presentation was all about like the underwriting requirements that are going to be required. So depending on that limit of insurance, if it's a $50,000 limit, you know, your requirements are going to be much lower than a $250,000 or above limit there. So kind of having the policies in place, the multi-factor authentication, all that stuff that seems like it's a big barrier to entry. There are people that kind of help you set up those plans so that you can qualify for the insurance limit that you actually need. Like that's the important part, is kind of looking at, hey, what do we need? And if we have to put certain processes in place, nobody's doing the process just to do it, right? It's all for a good reason.
Got it. How would a company decide what security measures are best for their company? If you're a 10-person employee count and you don't feel like you really have the budget to hire a consultant, what are your recommendations there?
I would just kind of analyze, you know, the type of data that you're holding, where that data is at, and everything. And if it is a smaller 2-employee, 3-employee, 10-employee company, maybe it's more or less back to the training aspect of it and really trying to hone in on that aspect. But really we really have to analyze and kind of go through the survey that Randy was talking about to understand really what are we working with here. And then that's really the first step, the analyzing of what we're working with. That's how you would then begin to determine what you need.
You know, just in a practical sense, if you're going to do nothing else, if you haven't really started this journey toward building a mature information security program, you know, on the practical, tactical side, multi-factor authentication and EDR, endpoint detection and response, those are two of the most critical pieces to have.
Excellent. That's great.
Yeah. And if you don't know where to get started, and if you're using Microsoft 365, you know, the EDR solution from Microsoft is very well respected in the industry. It's very approachable, very easy to get up and running, at least on the basics. And that would be a very easy place to start. Likewise, the multi-factor authentication is relatively easy on the Microsoft side of things.
Excellent. What about sharing on a video conferencing platform? Like we're on Zoom today, but there are others, Teams and so forth. And if you have remote team members, but you have sensitive data that you need to review, what's the liability there? What are your thoughts there if somebody is sharing their QuickBooks screen or they're sharing their credit card processing screen and it's in a platform like Zoom or Teams?
You know, I've never been asked that question, and you know, I can't accurately sit here and say like what should be done to prevent that. I would have to chew on that a little bit and talk to a few people. Maybe Randy might know something, but I'm sorry.
I think there's always some risk there of inadvertently sharing some information. There was some during COVID there were some kind of high profile events that happened with inappropriate content being shared and so forth. So I would say address this in your remote work policy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Excellent. I know that, for instance, Zoom has higher security options. There is a Zoom for Government feature for those that have to be government approved to deal with certain things. And so, it makes you wonder if you're going to share your screen, what concerns are there.
Yeah, the Microsoft has as well, the GCC High, or the Government Computing Cloud. So that would be a decision that's based on the entirety of the security program for the organization. They would choose that appropriate service, and then you'd want to also take advantage of the password security around the Zoom or Teams sessions too.
Excellent. What about partners? There's so much collaboration that it typically takes more than one company sometimes to get a project done. And sometimes that's a vendor or it's a supplier that we use their software that allows them to submit files to our printing company through a portal. And that might be from Kodak or Konica. What kind of concerns do we have there? What kind of liability if they get in from a back end vendor?
I think the best example of this in our recent memory is the Target breach, right? So we had vendors that were involved in HVAC systems that allowed an attacker in, that eventually pivoted into the point of sale systems. And so, yeah, absolutely, there's liability there. This is an area where I would defer to Andrew in terms of how the insurance companies deal with this mess. Quite frankly, who has that ultimate liability?
Yeah, so kind of how the insurance couples into that is back to those like data response expenses and notification expenses, identity recovery. So it's all, when a cyber event happens like that, the insurance company is going to try to look back and say, okay, how did our insured get caught up in all this? Did the employee click a link, or was it through one of those vendors? If it was through one of those vendors, I'll speak for Federated specifically. We'll hold your hand throughout that process, but we're going to then go back to that vendor and say, okay, you guys pass this information on to us. Did it start with you, or did you get it from somewhere else? And then Federated will be with their insurance company or with them specifically. And then you kind of go back and try to get it to the origin. And that's really how that process works there. So if it's like you mentioned, I guess if you guys have Kodak or other vendors and everything, they should be pretty secure and pretty buttoned up on their end. And it's important that you're buttoned up as well, so there's no cracks right there.
Okay. What if you're using a contract worker? Is it liability on that contractor side? They're not necessarily your employee. You're not necessarily buying from a supplier's software. You're using a contract worker. They would have to have similar policies in place.
When you say like a contract worker, you guys accept the job, but then you subcontract to another shop to complete that work?
Right.
So technically the subcontractor would be your employee. So if they don't have adequate limits or policy in place, then it's going to fall back on their employer. And then if their employer doesn't have the insurance policy in place and there's any expenses tied to it, the business will have to pay those expenses.
Okay.
I'm going to go back to policy on this one again, because I think your policy set should address this. How do you ensure that not only employees, but third-party contractors and vendors have received the right kind of cyber insurance training or cybersecurity training and have the right sort of cyber insurance if they're a subcontractor? What processes have you gone through to vet them out? And also, when we're talking specifically about vendors who come in for maybe a short duration contract or a little project that needs to be done, there should be policies that govern how you grant them access and how you revoke them access at the end of their engagement too. So making sure that they don't have persistent access.
Okay, that's a lot. Everybody's talking about integration, integration, integration. The more we can connect everything, the better support, the better service, the better products we provide to our members. So in the printing and packaging industry, there are lots of types of printing, and many of them we specialize in, and we do that in-house, but we're buying those that we do not. And I'll use the example of promotional products. If you're a general commercial printer that typically prints on paper, you don't generally print pens or coffee mugs. And so that's a service that you're providing to your clients because you want to be one size fits all. They can get everything from you, but you're going to have to connect to their site. And so now we have a site, a sub-site on the internet that is you're connecting to that offers pens and mouse pads. Same thing there with contracting that service. Who then is responsible?
I think that so. Let me just make sure that I have the question correct. You're saying that you're still subcontracting out work to another company, and but then in order for you to get the design or whatever to that company, you have to go through that website with them. So I mean, I think that it's depending on what that website or what that portal looks like. I mean, that program has to have some sort of security in place when it's set up. And so that's another thing, which whose website is it? Is it your website or is it their website? Who set up the website? And that's how the insurance is going to look at it, as to see how did the hack happen or how did the event start. That's kind of where we're going to look at it from our end when we open up our investigation.
Okay.
On the front end of this, the prevention side of this, I would use a process that's similar to what we've talked about before in terms of how you evaluate cloud services providers. Make sure that you've established some standards in terms of the criteria that you're looking for. Do they need to be SOC 2 compliant? Do they need to have multi-factor authentication? Do they need to prove to you or state to you that they encrypt data in transit and at rest? And so you can do a lot to mitigate your liability if you go through that process up front, define it in policy, operate that in practice, and make sure that you're consistent and that you're coming back on a regular basis and reviewing that information too. Things change.
Very good. Another question from the group. Do either of you have AI policies in regards to risk of open AI? You know, the liability can be large if there's misused or information that was proprietary.
I have an interesting story. This is a third-party story that I heard, but essentially there was this conference, this IT conference, and one of the topics was artificial intelligence and how to use it effectively. And this person raised her hand and said, "I am using this AI service to analyze my client's data." And there were just gasps heard within the room because this person was using an open AI model, not a captive model, not something that is contained within a tenant or anything like that. And so, you know, someone stood up and said, "Do you realize that you've exposed all of your clients' data by doing that?" And so I think that acceptable use policies for AI at this point need to be pretty strict. We've got to draw some very firm boundaries. And I would suggest that even if you have a captive AI, that you also limit the amount of sensitive information that can be fed into it, unless there are exceptions that are approved, unless there are very specific use cases, and that you start with a very tightened down policy and then you gradually let up on that as the use cases dictate and as executive management is able to evaluate that. One other thing that I think is interesting here too is that if we're talking about AI and how wonderful it is, Initially, I think there was a lot of skepticism amongst us that are, kind of old school IT folks, and we've gradually kind of opened up a little bit. One of the things that I've found is a huge benefit of using AI is to write policies. And so you can't just, say, write me a password policy. You've got to give it the right prompts and everything. And then you have to be able to evaluate that and determine if it's good. Does it meet the criteria that Andrew and Federated have laid out for me? Does it meet the criteria that Randy and Loffler have laid out for me? But you can go through that methodically and use it as a way of getting started. Give yourself that framework that you can then hang the details on top of. And it's a great way to get started. And I would suggest that any organization that's struggling with getting started with information securities or AI policies, give it a try to use AI to write those policies.
Excellent. Andrew, what are your thoughts on the AI topic?
The AI for us in the insurance industry, I like to compare it a lot to marijuana in the workplace a few years ago when that became legal. It's new to us. It's difficult. The actuarial side and the underwriting side, it's making the insurance industry nervous because, much like that example just was, if you put all that client information into an open source, that's huge. But then it's also, can an AI, platform, can they make a voice sound like a voice to approve a payment to a bank over the phone? Like there's a lot of stuff like that. That is where, the insurance industry is nervous about, but it's a little bit new for us to really know what all is in store. Really, like we kind of do our best, but then we kind of got to hold on and look at real-time information and figure out, where we're going to go with this. So I know that AI is a huge topic with big national insurance conventions. So, I think that Randy said a lot of good stuff with, you can use it to kind of help write your policies and everything, but really the name of the game is you rather be overcautious now and protect yourself. And then, then you can loosen it up as you go and you understand really the guidelines that you need to be in. But for right now, you don't want to open up Pandora's box per se, because once the toothpaste is out of the tube, it's out.
Right. Can't put that back. Lots to think about. I'm going to ask our FEC committee to come back on. If you'll turn your cameras back on and join the discussion on some of the topics that have come up here. I think there's so much to cover, and AI, for instance, is we're unsure. I mean, you can create a lot of things with AI that are not real, but they make it look real. You can put a tiger's head on a human's body, but that doesn't make that real, even though you might think it looks real. Someone brought to me an image from social that said Trump is putting images out there as himself as the new Pope. And I said, I don't believe that for 1 minute. I think that's AI, that's Photoshop. We can put his face on another image, and you have to determine, is that real or is it not? And there's a lot of that. Is it real or is it not?
Mm-hmm.
How do you guide your staff, your employees, to evaluate what is and what's not real?
Well, with the social media, you should probably have something in your handbook for your company, regardless of cybersecurity versus just company security. So to that point there, they probably shouldn't be delving on social media if it doesn't have any business related purposes. And so, just trying to monitor that within your company. But if your company does try to get messages out through social media, you got to funnel them through one individual is usually the best. And then you can kind of control it, so to speak.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we're stressing more is like double checking everything, right? I think Andrew or someone used the example before of, having a vendor or something, say, giving you different bank information or changing bank information, and, calling them or sending a different email or some other different type of communication to try to route back to a known contact to verify it. And then you get examples of, well, the voicemail or the voices can be fake now, and do you really know who you're talking to, and can phone calls or text messages get intercepted and all that kind of stuff. So it's like, it's really at least double checking, or if it still doesn't feel right, triple check, or just kind of verify as much as you can that it's a valid change or statement, or that the information is true.
Yeah, when
Yeah,
it comes to these kind of modern threats, I think a little bit of paranoia is just good business. You've got to be skeptical. You've got to have these kind of prearranged out of band communication methods, right? So if that message comes through saying, "Hey, transfer this money," you confirm that over text with the person who made that request, and make sure that you're closing the loop on those requests, verifying.
Excellent. Matt, how about you from the financial side? What are your thoughts on this entire discussion and how, from accounting standpoint, we need to start tracking information?
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure you are secure and you do have these policies, and you do mitigate some risks with insurance, and you follow the policies so that if an event happens or when it happens, you can recover from it. I think Randy, the stat he gave was 60% of companies, small businesses, go out of business in 6 months after a big breach. It is resonating with everybody on the call, right? I don't know too many small businesses that can withstand a big breach. So if we can have these insurance, if we can have all these policies in place, it's important so that if or when it happens, you can recover and it doesn't cost your business, your passion, going out of business.
That's a really great point. Any other thoughts on that topic?
I think at a minimum, we talked about deciding how much coverage you need or what coverage you need. I think at a minimum, you got to have the conversations and understand your risk, and then you can make at least an informed decision about what steps you feel comfortable making, or you feel you need to make, or what risk you're willing to take for your business. But at least you got to give yourself the information.
Great discussion. So much to think about. Gentlemen, is there anything that you want to add to the conversation before we close the program?
Just one thing, thinking about that statistic, the 60% of small businesses, small to medium businesses failing within 1 year of a cyber attack. One of the things that I've seen is that the single most important aspect that changes that calculation is that they get help from a professional incident response team. And whether that's something that they've prearranged through their written security policies or through their entitlements with insurance, that could be the life-saving moment for them, having that in place up front.
That's a great point. Who do you call when it happens?
I think I'll follow up on that. Yeah, it's very important to have that response plan in place. Talk with your insurance agent, your insurance carrier. Some carriers, they would like to be first on scene too. They don't want just a local tech company to be accepting ransoms or anything like that. Typically, the insurance company, because of a data breach and cyber related incidents are very unique. There is a special response team pretty much for that they're going to want to be involved. So when creating those response plans and everything, and creating enough processes to even be accepted by the insurance, then just make sure you have that next level conversation with them. Hey, if this happens and I run it all through this guy and then I provide a bill to you, will you guys cover it? A lot of times the insurance company will say no, because we would have handled it completely differently. So that's another important thing to note as well.
Good information. Very good. Well, thank you. This has been eye-opening. I would say it was very informative. We've had all of our attendees that are logged on stay until the very end, and we will get the recording and the slides that has contact information for both Randy and Andrew in those slides, so that if you do have additional questions, you can reach out. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very informational.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon,
Everyone
Bye-bye.
have a great day. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.